Welcome to Conspiracy Deconstructed. Today we are digging into something truly profound. We're looking at the research, the classified documents, and even the architectural blueprints that detail one of the U.S. government's deepest secrets.
We're talking about the plans that are designed to ensure the survival of the state itself, even if, Washington, D.C. just ceases to exist.
Exactly. And our mission today is pretty straightforward. We've got a stack of sources, declassified reports, journalistic deep dives into secret bunkers, legal analyses of emergency powers, and we're using them to understand one chilling concept: continuity of government.
Or COG, as it's known.
Right, COG. And look, this is more than just some dusty old file. This is a framework of extreme emergency procedures.
And it's backed by this administrative blueprint called the Continuity of Operations Plan, or COSAP.
So the question we're really asking is this: are these plans just responsible preparation for some unthinkable disaster? Or do they actually function as a mechanism for a secret, unelected group of officials?
A shadow government.
A shadow government, yeah.
Yeah.
To seize control during a crisis and run the country from these vast, hidden command centers.
And it's a critical distinction to make, because the physical architecture, the legal framework for a secret government, it absolutely exists. Our job is to look at the evidence and figure out if COG is really about defending the Constitution or if it's about preempting it when things get really bad.
Okay, so let's start with the theory itself, because you have to admit it's incredibly compelling.
Oh, it's a powerful narrative.
The core idea is that the U.S. government, especially when it comes to national security, doesn't really rely on the whole system of checks and balances that we all learn about, not when the stakes are, existentially high.
Exactly. The belief is that during a true crisis, and we're talking a nuclear strike, a massive pandemic, or something like 9/11, the elected leaders, the ones you see on TV, are essentially sidelined.
And in their place, this secret, untouchable bureaucratic structure, the shadow government, just activates.
Right. And it's not just a few people.
No, not at all. We're talking about high-level, mostly anonymous officials, people from the Department of Defense, the intelligence community, key civilian agencies. And they're not just hiding in their basements. They are immediately evacuated, whisked away to these huge, remote, secure locations.
Often deep underground.
Deep underground.
Yeah.
And this evacuation isn't just to keep them safe, right? That's the key part of the theory.
That's the absolute core of it. Proponents argue this group uses these vast, pre-written emergency powers. They're all contained in these classified documents that we're going to talk about later.
And these powers let them do, well, almost anything.
Almost anything. Suspend civil liberties, bring in different levels of martial law, control the media, essentially run the nation unilaterally from the darkness.
For how long?
Potentially indefinitely, until they decide the crisis is over.
Which is, the implication here is just staggering.
Okay.
It suggests that the constitutional government we know, Congress, the president you vote for, it's at best a temporary thing.
It's the dignified part of government, as some have called it. It's for show.
So when the chips are really down, this efficient, unelected network just takes over in an instant. It suggests our democracy is only for peacetime.
And what really grounds this theory, what makes it feel so real, is the physical evidence. We're not talking about hypotheticals. We are talking about literal, massive, self-sustaining cities built inside of mountains.
Financed with black budgets, operated in total secrecy.
Exactly. And you have to ask the question the believers ask. If the constitutional government is supposed to survive, why do you need to build a second redundant capital city that operates completely outside of public view? That architecture alone is powerful proof for the believer.
Okay, so to really understand why this whole system looks the way it does, we have to step back. We have to trace where this impulse for what governmental self-preservation comes from.
It's ancient. Any government that wants to last has to have a plan for what happens when it gets displaced.
Right. This isn't just a Cold War invention. You can see the beginnings of this in the earliest days of American history, long before atomic bombs were even a glimmer in anyone's eye.
Absolutely. Just think about 1776. The Continental Congress.
The Revolutionary War.
The British forces were advancing on Philadelphia and advancing fast. So on December 9th, the Congress passed a resolution to relocate. They literally just adjourned, packed up, and reconvened 3 days later in Baltimore.
So that's continuity planning, colonial style.
It was chaotic, but it worked. The legislature kept functioning even while on the run from an invading army.
But for the next, 150 years? That idea never really got formalized. There was no standing plan.
And you can see the consequences of that in 1814.
When the British burned Washington, D.C.
The chaos was just immense. I mean, the Secretary of State, James Monroe, had only a few hours' notice to try and salvage priceless government records. He famously saved that portrait of George Washington.
But the disarray, the loss of institutional knowledge, it was a disaster.
It caused confusion that bled right into the next administration. There was no backup plan. The government just stopped functioning efficiently for a while.
So it really took the existential dread of the Cold War, the idea that an entire city could be wiped out in minutes, to really institutionalize this concept.
That's the pivot point. It came in 1952. The threat of a Soviet nuclear attack on D.C. was the catalyst. President Truman issued a mandate ordering all federal offices to develop their own continuity plans.
And that's what establishes the modern cog and coup framework we're talking about today.
Right. And the central principle from then is the same as it is now. COG is about having defined procedures to allow a government to continue its essential operations even after a catastrophic event.
Specifically, a nuclear war, which means you need instant activation and complete redundancy.
And you can't survive a thermonuclear blast in, a regular office building in D.C. So this principle of COG immediately required massive specialized architecture.
Bunkers.
The bunkers. And this infrastructure had to be big enough, not just for the executive branch, but for entire branches of government. Congress, the courts, and to maintain critical systems for months, maybe even years.
I think the most incredible example of this, and the one that really fuels the whole shadow government idea because of its secrecy, has to be the Greenbrier.
Oh, the Greenbrier is a perfect example. It's in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, and for over 3 decades, it was Congress's secret hideout, codename Project Greek Island.
And it was built under this huge, opulent resort hotel.
That was the cover story. Starting in 1958, they built this massive 112,000 square foot shelter, pretending they were just adding a new conference wing to the resort. Thousands of construction workers, all sworn to secrecy, built what was essentially a self-contained underground U.S. Capitol.
And the details are just wild.
Yeah.
It was fully set up to host all 535 members of Congress, plus their staff. It had a broadcast booth for a Speaker of the House, a dentist's office,
medical facilities, sleeping quarters, a huge cafeteria that could seat 400 people, its own power plant, its own water supply. It was designed to be totally sealed off from the outside world for up to 40 days.
And nobody knew. Until when?
Until 1992. The Washington Post ran an expose and blew the whole thing open. And that revelation just showed the public the incredible scale of deception that was required to maintain this COG infrastructure. For decades, presidents, corporate leaders, everyone was staying at this resort totally unaware they were sleeping on top of Congress's doomsday bunker.
And it wasn't just about political survival. They were thinking about the economy, too.
Absolutely. You have to think about monetary continuity. What happens to the money supply after an apocalypse?
The Federal Reserve had a plan for that.
They did, at a place called Mount Pony in Culpeper, Virginia. It opened in 1969. And this wasn't just a vault. It was designed to ensure there was still a functioning currency for any surviving economy.
The sources say it held over $4 billion in cash. And it was mostly in old, weird denominations.
That's right, purely for efficiency. They didn't want to use up new bills that were in circulation. So the vault was filled with huge amounts of the unpopular $2 bill and other large bills that had been phased out.
The idea being that you could jumpstart the post-nuclear economy with cash that was already printed and stored safely away.
Exactly. They estimated that supply could last whatever was left of the U.S. economy for at least 2 years. It shows you the level of detail they were thinking about, right down to the paper money.
And we should be really clear here. This kind of intense planning, it isn't just a U.S. thing.
Not at all. COG is standard practice for any major power. In Canada, they built a series of nuclear bunkers people called Diefenbunkers after the prime minister.
And in Europe, they split things up for redundancy.
Right. Denmark created 2 separate, highly secure sites, Regan Vest and Regan Est, designed to house the government and the royal family in 2 different locations.
And of course, there's Russia. The scale of their secret facilities is legendary.
The massive underground complex at Mount Yamantau is probably the most famous example. Construction started back in the Soviet era, and it's still going on today. It's clearly meant for government and military survival in a nuclear war.
Then there's the rumored Metro 2 system under Moscow. This whole secret parallel subway line just for government and military use.
So this global context really reinforces that COG is a rational, pragmatic thing for a state to do. But it's the sheer scale and the necessary secrecy of the U.S. system that really made it the perfect breeding ground for the shadow government theory.
Okay, so now let's pivot to the evidence. The actual things that believers use to argue that COG isn't just a backup plan, but a shadow government ready to take over.
And we have to present these as proponents see them. They see the official explanations as, flimsy cover stories.
Let's start with evidence number 1, the Iron City inside the mountain, Raven Rock.
Right. The argument is, okay, so the Greenbrier was decommissioned, but Raven Rock proves the secret government is still very much in business.
Site R near Camp David.
And unlike the Greenbrier, Site R is fully operational, heavily classified. It's known as the Underground Pentagon. Some people called it Harry's Hole after Truman. It's the absolute peak of Cold War engineering and modern tech.
And the descriptions from authors who've investigated it, like Garrett Kraft, they're what really sell the theory. He described it as a massive, hollowed-out mountain, a freestanding city with 3-story buildings built inside of it.
It is more than a bunker. It's a self-sustaining infrastructure hub. It has its own police and fire departments, medical facilities, massive dining halls that run 204/7. They serve 4 meals a day to accommodate all the different shifts.
And it can hold, what, up to 5,000 people?
That's the estimate, and it's built half a mile inside the mountain and another half a mile below the peak. It's basically invulnerable to a conventional attack.
So the proponent's argument here is devastatingly simple. Why, in a democracy, do you need a secret, self-sustaining city inside a mountain, classified away from the public, if not to house a truly separate government?
A shadow government ready to take control. They see it as a literal parallel capital.
And this physical infrastructure, it got its first real-world test on September 11th, 2001. Which brings us to evidence number 2, the dramatic 9/11 activation.
For believers, this is the moment the shadow government stepped out of the shadows.
After the attacks, the Continuity of Operations Plan, CUHOC, was officially activated, the first time it was used in response to a direct attack on the U.S. homeland.
And proponents really emphasize the speed and the secrecy of what happened next. Vice President Cheney was immediately taken down to the PEO, the bunker beneath the White House.
But more importantly for the theory, the bigger COG plan kicked into gear. And top political leaders, cabinet members, high-ranking military officials, they were all whisked away.
To distant, secure locations, including Site R, Raven Rock, and another facility called Mount Weather.
And the suspicion here is about priority. Proponents argue that the immediate focus wasn't on defending the Capitol, but on securing this very specific group of people, the deep state.
And the media picked up on it right away, which gave the whole theory a huge dose of legitimacy.
I remember the headlines. The Washington Post ran one on March 1st, 2002 that said, "Shadow government is at work in secret." It even noted that Congress itself often had no idea who had been evacuated or where they'd gone.
That secrecy suggested they were operating under a completely parallel system of authority, which by necessity they were.
Okay, so that brings us to the final piece of evidence. And for many, this is the smoking gun. Evidence number 3, the secret rulebook of dictatorial power.
The PEAs, Presidential Emergency Action Documents.
Right. And these aren't just ideas. These are actual pre-written documents.
They're classified draft executive orders, proclamations, messages to Congress. As of a few years ago, there were estimated to be 56 of them, all ready for the president to sign at the exact moment of a crisis.
And the contents of these documents, that's what feeds the fear. They aren't just administrative memos.
No, they are mechanisms for ending normal democratic rule. And that's the core of the proponent's argument. The Brennan Center for Justice and other watchdog groups have identified what these PEAs can authorize.
And it's extreme stuff.
It is. Detention of alien enemies and other dangerous persons. Various forms of martial law, which is essentially military rule. Censorship of the news.
And the most chilling one, the suspension of the writ of habeas corpus. We need to explain just how serious that is.
Habeas corpus is the constitutional guarantee that requires the government to bring a person before a court and explain why they're being held. It is the fundamental check against unlawful imprisonment.
So if a PED authorizes its suspension,
it means the government, acting under executive authority, can arrest and indefinitely detain anyone it deems a dangerous person without charges, without evidence, without a judge. Proponents argue this is the mechanism for instant, absolute, autocratic power.
So the argument is that the government has secretly pre-planned the legal off-ramp from the Constitution. And because the documents are pre-written and ready to go, the shadow government already has its operating manual.
Okay, so now we have to pivot. We need to shift from looking at COG through that lens of conspiracy and start analyzing it as a pragmatic, legally necessary function of a modern state.
All right, let's start the deconstruction with evidence number 1. The bunkers. Raven Rock is huge and scary, but what does the fate of the other bunkers tell us?
The fate of those earlier bunkers is really instructive. I mean, if COG was a permanent mechanism for a deep state takeover, why would you decommission these facilities? Why would you expose them?
The Greenbrier bunker is now a tourist attraction. You can take a tour.
Exactly. And the Federal Reserve bunker at Mount Pony, with its billions in $2 bills, it's now home to the National Audiovisual Conservation Center for the Library of Congress.
So these transitions show that the COG architecture is dynamic. It's driven by the current threat level.
When the immediate threat of the Cold War faded, the need for these specific decentralized bunkers for every single branch of government, it lessened.
So what about Raven Rock itself, the underground Pentagon? What is its confirmed purpose today?
The Department of Defense has confirmed that its primary function isn't to house a parallel White House. It's there to support the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and other senior DoD officials.
So its goal is to allow the execution of essential DoD functions.
Right. Command, control, intelligence. It's a military command center designed to maintain military structure. It's not for governing the entire civilian nation, though other civilian agencies do have space there.
So its existence proves there's vast military redundancy, but not necessarily a hidden constitutional successor government.
Precisely. The military needs uninterrupted command authority in a crisis. Site R ensures that.
Okay, now let's deconstruct the 9/11 activation. The movement of officials was dramatic, sure, but was it a coup or was it procedure?
It was defined procedure. It was governed by specific presidential directives. The activation on 9/11 was executed under something called National Security Policy Directive 51, or NSPD 51.
And what did that directive do?
It explicitly addresses national continuity policy. It formalizes the necessity of what's called enduring constitutional government.
ECG, enduring constitutional government.
The purpose is not to replace the Constitution, but to ensure the presidential line of succession, which was formalized in 1947, is protected and can be used. The whole movement of people was about securing the legitimate elected line of command.
And the fact that Vice President Cheney was moved immediately to the PEOC, that's often cited as the ultimate counterproof, right?
Absolutely. Cheney was an elected official, second in command. He was being positioned to continue the existing legitimate chain of command. If the plan was a hostile takeover by some anonymous deep state, the last thing you would do is put the elected vice president in the central command bunker.
You'd isolate him somewhere.
Exactly. His presence there proves the system prioritizes the legitimate line of succession.
And this brings us to the whole designated survivor concept,
which is a totally non-conspiratorial mechanism that just formalizes this redundancy. It's an official high in the line of succession, usually a cabinet secretary, who is chosen to stay away from big events like the State of the Union.
Right, so if everyone in the Capitol is killed in one event,
there is still one surviving, legitimately appointed official ready to immediately assume the presidency. It proves the government is overtly planning for replacement based on the existing constitutional structure, not waiting for some secret bureaucracy to emerge from a cave.
It's a mechanism for continuity, not a coup.
Exactly.
Okay, finally, let's tackle the PEDs, the secret rule book. We have to acknowledge the powers they contain are horrifying. Suspension of habeas corpus, censorship.
Yep.
How can that be justified?
And we have to be clear, the chilling content is real, but context is everything here. These documents are prepared in anticipation of the most extreme, worst-case hypothetical scenarios.
Like a decapitation strike.
A decapitation strike that makes normal constitutional function totally impossible. They were first created during the Eisenhower administration, specifically for a full-scale nuclear attack. In a scenario like that, the immediate priority shifts from maintaining civil liberties to the survival of the state itself.
So they're a legal framework for the absolute worst-case scenario. But they're still just drafts. They're not active law.
That is the key. They are draft documents. They require a president's signature to become active, and their use is intended to be temporary until constitutional government can be restored.
But the democratic system itself is pushing back on the secrecy, isn't it? Congress is actively trying to get oversight.
It is, and this is the deconstruction that really matters. The political struggle for oversight. The secrecy around the PEDs has repeatedly prompted members of Congress to introduce legislation, like the Article 1 Act.
And that act would do what?
It would require the president to disclose the PEDs to congressional oversight committees. It's a direct attempt by the legislative branch to assert its right to oversight over potential executive overreach, even in crisis planning.
So it proves that the checks and balances are still at work. They're aware of the danger in these documents, and they're trying to constrain that power.
It shows that democracy is still functioning, pushing back against unilateral control, even if the documents themselves have to remain classified for national security reasons.
Okay, so we've established that the COG program is a necessary, if terrifying, bureaucratic function. But that leaves a big question. Why is the shadow government theory so powerful? Why do so many people default to believing in a secret cabal?
I think it speaks to a really deep human need for order and for competence, especially during moments of profound chaos.
Like on 9/11.
Exactly. The immediate images from that day were of spectacular failure. Planes were intercepted, communications broke down, our leaders were clearly vulnerable. In that vacuum of trust, there's a strange comfort in believing that something competent and highly skilled is actually in charge.
Even if that something is secret and undemocratic.
Even then, it provides a coherent answer to overwhelming fear. If the visible government fails, the mind rationalizes that a hidden, efficient bureaucracy must still be running the show.
There's a theory about this, right? The idea of a double government.
Yes, from the scholar Michael Glennon. He argues the U.S. essentially operates with two distinct political structures. First, you have the dignified institutions.
The presidency, Congress, the courts, the parts we see.
Right. They generate public legitimacy, they have debates, they're the public face of democracy, they're for show in a way.
And second,
you have the efficient institutions. This is the apparatus that truly runs national security and foreign policy. Glennon calls this the Trumanite network.
The Trumanite network, meaning the permanent bureaucracy, the deep administrative state.
That's it. It's the few hundred key people who manage the NSA, the CIA, the FBI, the senior military leadership. And Glennon's insight is that when it comes to long-term national security policy, like the COG plan, the dignified institutions, Congress, and the president, they largely defer to the efficient institutions, the Trumanite network.
So the conspiracy narrative is basically the public accurately noticing that elected leaders are often powerless to change these deeply entrenched security policies.
And they misinterpret the reason.
They see the continuity of policy from one administration to the next and assume it's a hostile, secret takeover, when in reality it's just deep-seated bureaucratic inertia. And the COG plan basically codifies that inertia.
It does. The plan isn't about an anonymous cabal seizing power. It's about ensuring that the essential functions managed by that Trumanite network continue, no matter who is in the Oval Office.
So when people saw the dramatic movements on 9/11, they didn't see constitutional continuity. They saw the efficient, unelected power structure moving to secure itself.
And that creates a paradox, doesn't it? The very act of preparing for the worst-case scenario, using classified documents like the PEDs, it can't help but undermine public trust in normal democracy. To protect democracy from an existential threat, the government has to adopt systems that look profoundly undemocratic.
And that's the perfect breeding ground for belief in a shadow government.
Fear simplifies a very complex bureaucratic reality into a much more satisfying conspiracy theory of centralized malicious control.
So we've gone on quite a journey today. From the first acts of governmental self-preservation back in 1776, through the massive bomb-proof bunkers of the Cold War, right up to the crisis activation of the COG plan on 9/11.
And the reality is that continuity of government is a framework for state survival. It was created out of necessity to ensure an enduring constitutional government continues. The infrastructure evolves as threats change, and the activation follows legal directives to protect the legitimate elected line of succession.
But the core of the controversy, it's still the PEDs. These secret legal documents that pre-authorize the suspension of core civil liberties, they aren't a fantasy. They're real classified instruments of potential power.
And while the COG plans ensure the government survives, the fundamental provocative question remains for all of us. When a catastrophe grants the executive branch access to the vast non-democratic powers written into those classified PEDs, how much of the democratic republic we cherish is truly preserved in the process?
So we want to leave you with this question. Given the reality of these secret documents and the existence of hidden command centers, do you feel more secure knowing these systems exist to ensure continuity? Or are you more concerned about the immense, classified, and largely unchecked power they represent? Let us know what you think. And join us next time on Conspiracy Deconstructed.